Now, as you've probably long since heard, a couple weeks back we learned that Rosario Dawson had been cast to play Ahsoka Tano in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and even though, as far as I know, this hasn't been officially confirmed by Dawson or anyone at Lucasfilm, the silence or no one refuting any of this has been pretty deafening, and I think we can say with 99.9% certainty, this is happening. And that may be the reason why they're staying silent on this is they didn't want this news to come out until maybe she appeared in a trailer or perhaps just showed up in an episode and stunned us all. And the whole Baby Yoda thing is proof they can keep a hell of a secret when they really want to. Whatever the case may be, again, this seems like something that is absolutely happening. And since learning this, there are even reports coming out that Dawson has signed a multi-show deal, which has led some to believe she could be getting her own series in the near future. Or maybe she'll show up in the Cassian Andor series, which makes sense because Cassian was a Fulcrum agent, just like Ahsoka was. In fact, she was the first Fulcrum agent. And she could, I guess, also show up in the Obi-Wan series, though I really don't know about that one, or if it'd make a ton of sense. But it would be cool and interesting to see a reunion between those two. Anyway, I think her own show or series on Disney Plus is something that could certainly happen, especially if her appearance in Season 2 of The Mandalorian goes over well with both longtime fans who know her and know her well from both the Clone Wars and Rebels, and maybe those who've never seen her in those shows and will be getting their first look at her in The Mandalorian. I also then wouldn't be surprised if her appearance in The Mandalorian very much sets up her own show. In fact, I'd almost be surprised if they didn't use the opportunity to do just that. I mean, you've got Rosario Dawson, a fantastic actress who has great love and passion for the character. She's been campaigning to play her for years, in fact. And of course, Ahsoka is such a fan favorite, again, for those who know her, which no, certainly isn't all fans right now. But that's exactly why you put her in The Mandalorian and give her an interesting part to play in that show. In other words, you've got the perfect combination to produce a hit series here. An eager actress playing a character most fans love and want more of, and a hook set in an already popular show. And speaking of all that, I do think there's a pretty big part she could play in The Mandalorian, which would be taking Baby Yoda home. I mean, if anyone's going to know what exactly he is and maybe where he's from, it'd be a former Jedi like Ahsoka. And I know a lot of people don't like it when I suggest that Baby Yoda's story, at least here in The Mandalorian, will be resolved in Season 2. Call me crazy or stupid, you wouldn't be the first to say either to me. But I don't think you want to keep him around so long that the novelty begins to wear off. Unless Baby Yoda ages and starts talking at some point, or develops into something beyond just being the cute baby that does adorable things, and sometimes saves the day, and sometimes needs to be saved himself, you run the risk of it maybe getting a bit old. And I say maybe because there is a lot of love for the character and his dynamic with the Mandalorian. It is great, I'm not saying otherwise. Still, I think the last thing they'd want to do is to overuse what has been, for better or worse, the most beloved character to come out of the Disney era of Star Wars thus far. And so we now come to my first theory, which is that at some point in the upcoming season of The Mandalorian, probably towards the end if not the very end, Ahsoka takes Baby Yoda back to his people, where she herself could have a very profound experience that sets her down a new path. This could then be when and where she becomes Ahsoka the White, as we see at the end of Rebels. Because I really don't think you want her appearance in The Mandalorian to come after what we saw at the end of Rebels. I think you want that to instead be after her appearance in The Mandalorian. And then her adventure with Sabine to find Ezra could be what her own series is all about, or at least what it starts out as, before kind of becoming more adventures in the unknown regions. It could even include Thrawn, the Chiss Ascendancy, or maybe the Grisk, which is an interesting species the new Thrawn novels by Timothy Zahn introduced. And yeah, I know some will now say, but The Mandalorian is set 5 years after the end of Return of the Jedi, and Rebels took place before the original trilogy, and that final scene of Rebels seems to take place right after the war ends. But we don't know that for sure. That scene at the end of Rebels could take place several years after the war ends, 5 or 6 years in fact, after Ahsoka's appearance in The Mandalorian, and after she takes Baby Yoda home and has, again, some sort of profound experience there. Basically, I think Baby Yoda and going to the home planet of that species could be a good way of explaining why she becomes Ahsoka the White, instead of her just showing up that way in The Mandalorian and implying she may have already gone on the quest to find Ezra with Sabine. because I really don't think you want to spoil anything about that. I dare say there's a lot of fans eagerly awaiting that story someday, and hopefully soon, and they don't want it spoiled that Ahsoka is going to live through it, not that they necessarily want her to die in that story. The problem this leaves, though, which brings us to my next theory, is what was she doing during the bulk of the Galactic Civil War, or what was she doing during the events of the original trilogy? We know, as seen in Rebels, that Ezra briefly pulls her into the world between worlds, saving her from being killed by Vader, and we then assume she went back to almost the exact same moment in time she got taken out of, and then she's seen walking down into the Sith Temple on Malachor, which is the last time we see her until the last scene in Rebels, where she shows up as Ahsoka the White. So again, what was she doing during all those years? Did she perhaps spend that whole time on Malachor, learning the ways of the dark side? And I don't mean practicing the ways, but instead trying to learn about it. Could that then be what leads her to becoming Ahsoka the White, a profound understanding of the dark side? Could she have confronted and overcome all her fear, becoming a near-perfect servant of the light? Sounds a bit much, but who knows, I suppose. And if she didn't spend much time on Malachor, where else could she have been? Why didn't she go back to help the rebellion, or perhaps seek out Luke, the son of her fallen master? A third theory is that she maybe seeks out the Bendu, or he seeks her out. And Dave Filoni has even shown us that these two do meet, though it happens before Malachor, and there's no way of knowing if they encountered each other again afterwards, but there's nothing to say they didn't. There's nothing to say Ahsoka didn't train under the Bendu. Though that doesn't explain why she seems to become Ahsoka the White and not Ahsoka the one in the middle. Though just because she's wearing white robes doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could just be what she decided to wear that particular day. Though honestly here, I do think it heavily implies something has happened to her or something has changed about her, even if it's just changed her view or outlook on things a bit. And it's going to be very curious what Ahsoka shows up in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Will it be Ahsoka the White, or something before that, or something after even? And what, if any, explanation will we get for what she's been up to? Either way, I think it's clear we're going to be getting a lot more Ahsoka in the future here, which does have some fans concerned that she'll be overused. There are also those who think she's already been overused, and that she should have died in Season 2 of Rebels in her duel with Vader. In fact, you could almost argue that Dave Filoni himself can't seem to accept the lesson Ahsoka was meant to teach Anakin, and that is to learn to let go. That said, I do think there is still a story to tell with Ahsoka. I've talked before about how the character has always been, in a sense, under the shadow of Anakin, that her relationship with him and coping with learning he became Vader has pretty much defined the character in the two shows that she's been in thus far, of course being Clone Wars and Rebels. And so it could be very interesting to see what she does, who she becomes, without that burden. I mean, I'm going to assume that Ahsoka will have found out that, in the end, Anakin came back to the light and turned on Palpatine. Perhaps she'll even be visited by his Force ghost at some point. Either way, I want to believe that Luke and Ahsoka meet and have a really interesting heart-to-heart talk about Anakin. That's a moment I'm very much waiting to see somewhere sometime. Again though, one way or another, I think a lot more Ahsoka is coming, and only time will tell if it turns out to be amazing, or maybe too much of a good thing. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about my theories, or to tell me if you think they run the risk of using Ahsoka too much. Or tell me if you think she should have been killed by Vader in Rebels, though that might make a pretty interesting poll question someday. Anyway, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.